dispatch lighting and PD mailboxes, I believe, were only a one-time thing last year, and so they're out of the budget. So that's actually decreased slightly by $700, so it's $13,300. And then there's no other charges, so the total is $106,773. Wait a minute, I think there's a fridge in there for $1,800, which sounds like a lot, and I did ask for that, about that. Evidently, it's a very small space, so they have to get a certain size. They budgeted, they think and hope, a little bit high, but, you know, it's not like you can just go into an appliance store and get what's on the floor. They have to have a particular size. I believe that's for the police department side. So let's see. And, well, you probably don't want to talk about capital, but they did talk about, again, the radios, which I believe is in the capital budget.
There's,
That's not mine.
right. I
That's
was
your
waiting for the
department.
warrant articles to
Yeah.
come out with that data. And I believe the Board of Selectmen are taking up the warrant article on Monday or Tuesday of next week, and we should have a rough copy after that meeting.
Yeah, Barbara and I have spent a lot of time on that. We're just about done. I think the main thing that needs to be plugged in are some placeholders. Multi-capital items, I believe, will be discussed on the 12th and also on the 19th, because sewer and water is coming in for a big discussion about the
That's right.
Main Street water line and
Oh,
also
yeah.
some of their capital needs.
Whoops.
Sorry.
I got to remember to post that meeting. Thank you for reminding me of that. Iron bond. Okay.
So unless there's any questions,
I don't see any.
Oh, I just had one question, and this is a stupid question. On refrigerator, and this is, they mentioned, oh, I'm sorry, regarding refrigerator, and they mentioned it was custom because, is there any way they can change the cutout and use a standard refrigerator rather than getting a custom refrigerator? Now, I met this morning, I saw a picture, so that may not be feasible, but from
Yeah.
a thought process, rather than saying, let's go out and buy a custom refrigerator, is there any way to change the cutout to get a standard refrigerator? And then going forward, we'd have to keep buying custom refrigerators. I assume they're more expensive than a standard.
they are, though I believe that they said that's been there since
30 years.
it was built, so it did last a long time, though I don't think they're built that way anymore, but I don't know. They made it sound as if it would be more difficult to do that, but who knows? I don't know.
Sometimes I just think of a cultural thought process we go through, you know, rather than just wrote some budgets. Like right now, the budget from last year to this year is 20% increase. And you see some of the line items, and a lot of the budgets is just like 3,000 this year, 3,000 last year, 3,000 this year. We can put a algorithm in and get it, but from a cultural perspective, I think maybe a little bit of out-of-box thinking and some of these things would be like, let's not the small items obviously, but some of the bigger items, let's think a little bit like why and why not.
You know, I don't know. I'm just gonna, thing that came up in the capital planning committee was that they have a shower in there in the police side of the thing, and they wanted to expand the shower because it's very, very tight. But the actual construction of the building makes it like an unbelievably expensive process to increase the shower like 6 inches.
Yeah.
So, I mean, so we're looking into alternatives to that. So it could be something actually structural with the building, the way it's constructed, that, you know, if they were to try and open up the wall,
It could
you're
be
gonna find that you just can't expand it. I'm just saying
No,
that's for
pipes
the
and everything
shower.
like that, yeah, it probably makes sense, just a thought.
Yeah, no, and it's a one-time expense. It probably lasts another
30
well,
years.
knock
Well,
on
it
wood.
probably won't last 30 years. I don't think they're built that way anymore, but then again, you know, you wonder about how much really it's used. It's not like you got teenagers into the refrigerator every 10 seconds and always opening it and slamming the door. They
Right.
probably take a little bit better care of it than a run-of-the-mill family might.
And the oil might be like.
Well, that is sort of a guesstimate, I mean, I know they budgeted a bit higher. I don't know if that was at the last minute that you bumped up the oil? You know? The oil, yeah,
Oil.
the heating oil. I know they were all bumped up. Yeah,
I was talking today, and I think the cost right now is about $2.33 a gallon, but the contract runs out the end of June.
Right.
And then it'd be I think that we're looking at $4 as a minimal, and go from there. So I think that's what I don't know as a percent whether 41 versus 44, but that's going to be equivalent, because it's almost 2x, so that 41 would probably, at 2x, would say 80, but it'd probably be closer to 70 or something along those lines, right? I do the math.
I'm sure they bid it out, but I'm not sure what the dates are.
Yeah,
they probably bid it in the summer, I would imagine.
630 is up,
Yeah, but, I mean, you wouldn't be using a lot of oil in the
not in
summer.
the
but-
summer. Okay, but I think
Yeah,
that might be a little light there, that's what I'm saying, but we don't know.
Yeah, that's a big unknown.
So Barbara, do you want to shed some light on that one? When do we actually go out to renegotiate the contract for the town bid? Did we lose her?
Lost her.
Okay, oh well,
Oh,
oh well.
I think we've had those uncertainties in the past, and it's going to be hard to time given where we are. So I think we just understand the basis, what's in here, and then if it comes in higher and we can't do it through conservation or something else, we just manage it during the year.
I know that Barbara had said in the meeting last week, she was using $4
Yeah.
for this
she
and
was.
gas, so.
you know, and you can't, I mean, the building is open 24 hours. I mean, there's people in it. It's not like here, you might be able to turn the heat down a little bit at night, but obviously, there's always people in that public safety complex. So, you aren't going to get any cost savings by turning it down.
Okay, Kathy. You want to make a motion on the
Yes.
safety complex?
Sure, I'll make the motion to, how do we make these motions? To approve the budget for the public safety complex at
106.
$106,773.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay. 106,733, Kathy and Jim. Any further questions or comments? Larry, you gotta use the mic.
Thank you. Should the motion read approved to recommend to the town meeting?
That's right. Yeah, you would have to be first at this.
But we don't approve, we recommend. There is, you
I
know,
was going to read the
We've
minutes
always
from
said
last year.
that it's recommended town meeting approve, or town meeting, you know,
we recommend the approval by the town. We don't start anything, we don't end anything.
That's just a recommendation.
Okay, so I recommend to the town that we approve the budget of the safety complex at $106,773. You
773.
gonna second that?
Yeah, Jim's got that. Okay, any further? All those in favor? So that's 3, 4, 8 to nothing. No, 7 to nothing, sorry. Okay,
Well, I can start on the fire department itself, which is D24.
there she's back. Okay,
So here you have, in the personnel, there's been a request for, I believe, 3.5, 3 at the beginning of the fiscal year and 1 in January, is that right? Am I getting that right? For the fire department, yes. Several reasons he's asking for the request. He told me that 59 days last year, there was no coverage due to staffing. They are relying on mutual aid much more than normal because their calls have just been increasing. That's in his, if you look at his memo in the back under appendix, I think it's A. They've been steadily going up every year. So the chief thinks that we're relying on mutual aid a little too much, that it's really supposed to be when you're in a really tight squeeze and not because, it's not because of equipment, that we don't have the ambulance or the fire equipment. It's because we don't, in his words, we don't have the personnel. So he did say that, okay, they have 12 firemen plus the chief, so they have 13. One of the other issues is that he only now has 3 call firefighters. He says it's very difficult to get them, to keep them, to get them properly trained, whereas probably even 10 years ago, we probably had, I don't remember the numbers, but probably at least a dozen. He just can't seem to get the call firefighters, so he really has to have the full time. He says we have one firefighter for each 700, one firefighter per 738 residents, and in many towns, it's, well, he said Worcester is 300, which seems a lot. I did look up some numbers that the international, ICMA, whatever that stands for, the International City Management Association recommends, I believe, or they said the average is 1.52 firefighters per 1,000 residents. So we are not,
Kathy,
Quite
what
there.
was our number?
we have one for 738, per 738 residents. And the ICMA says that the average is about 1.52 per 1,000 residents. He thinks it should be a little higher.
Yeah.
He's thinking it's more around, should be around 20, ideally. Let's see, we have 3 ambulances that we do use, we have a spare, basically. So that is why he's applied for the SAFER grant for 3 years. They will pay 100%, and then after that, it's on us. If he does get the 3 new firefighters, some of the overtime would likely go down. I did ask him, are we losing revenue because we're using mutual aid? And he says, again, I'm not sure how he got this estimate, but he thinks it's about $225,000 of billable revenue that has gone to basically the other towns that are covering for them. And we collect, he thinks, about, in revenue, we actually get in, we bill more, but what we actually get in is about $585,000.
Are you talking just in the ambulance?
Yeah. Yeah. We don't charge for firefighter calls, do we?
I don't know.
No, I don't think so. So that is why there's such an increase in the salary and wages account.
Are we working off of the requested or the recommended? Which one are we
Where
working
the
off?
FinCom recommended.
Yeah, but there's a department request and there's
Requested
an
or what the
administrative
administrator
We
recommended?
would be
Which-
going off administrator
So
recommended.
this is what it is, okay.
So the administrator's recommending a little bit less, 1,725,410 versus 1,899.
One's 20%, the other's 8.7, so
Yeah.
pretty, yes.
Yeah. I mean, if he actually got the 3, I don't know if he wouldn't, I mean, the overtime did go up, so I don't know whether he would decrease that a bit. Then, in the purchase of services, few new things, starting at the bottom. Actually, though the administrator's not recommending it, is $15,300 for cancer screenings. Evidently, it's about $850 for each screening for firefighters. Private insurance does not pay for it, and their plan would be to do it every 5 years. He did think about, doing it incrementally, so, a few every year, a few firefighters, but he said to me, who do you pick each year? Anyway, so that's a new one, though not recommended by the administrator. And there's a couple of, again, one-time things at the bottom there, software. Those are new, I believe, one time. As far as the rest of it, again, there's just, some increases, bumps up. in each category. I don't think anything went down. Well, a couple stayed the same. But
Kathy, do we know where we are in the negotiations with the union?
they're still ongoing. The contract expired last June 30th.
Okay, so they're working right now on the terms of the old contract.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. They did just hire, or it was just approved by the Board of Selectmen, a deputy fire chief. You might have seen that. And he will oversee training, EMS accreditation, and he is not in the union, just as a note. I don't know, does anybody have any questions on the purchase of
The
services?
deputy chief, I had a question. Is he also going to be engaged in fire inspection as well? Is that something the selectmen said, that he would have that responsibility?
He would be, the way I understood it from the meeting last week is that they were hiring a full-time inspector, but that the deputy chief would also take on some of that responsibility. So there'd be like 1.5
Right,
FTEs as far as fire inspectors.
yeah, that wasn't to be his main
Sole
role.
purpose, yeah.
No, he did say there's a lot of inspections to be done in this town.
When he explained it last week's meeting, that between the hotels and.
And
you know, some of these
businesses, I
things.
think I want to say he said around 400?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a lot for a small town. Yeah. So, and he said some of them weren't being completely done, or not done completely, so.
And Mike, you have a,
So the big issue in this year's budget is staffing. And I think the increase is based on one FTE, assuming you don't get the SAFER grant. But if the SAFER grant does come through, we've gone through this before, right? It's great for the first couple of years because we got three new people, it's not cost us any money. And then we have to absorb 3 FTEs in the budget down the road, and it comes as a hit there. And I think I would, the lost revenues from calls that we're sending out to mutual aid is a nice tidbit. It does provide a revenue source. I think the issue is not necessarily revenue that we're missing, but are we providing the level of service for public safety and so forth to the residents? And what's the staffing we need to do that? It seems that that's, the one department that keeps growing and growing. We haven't added many police officers, but we keep adding more people in the fire department. So I got to ask, we keep talking firefighters, and I realize they're going to be the EMTs and the folks who are doing ambulance calls. Yeah, but before we add 3 more bodies in here, and then it's 3 more after that, because we still don't have the level that we need, a lot of communities do use, outsourced ambulance services on a contract basis. That may come as a lesser overall expense to our budget. Maybe you cover those through revenues versus necessarily additional staff. And with that comes Worcester County retirement and insurance costs and everything else in the back of the book that keeps adding up. So while I'm not questioning whether we need more staff in order to provide a level of service that clearly has been growing over the years, I'm asking whether we've pursued all other options to make sure that we're getting that level of service that's needed in the most cost-effective way.
go ahead, Bob.
I have mentioned that.
So Bob, you want to come up and just speak into the mic while, people at home?
I mean, I can't speak so much to having detailed conversations with the chief, although it has come up, but I think the way it was left is a lot of times that kind of a decision becomes a political decision, believe it or not, rather than a finance decision, and there's a perception in the town that they're losing control over the ambulance department if you start to privatize it. That can be an issue. I think that came up, and that might be something that also has to be addressed besides the money.
I'd look at it too, is just, like for this year in the budget, we're estimating $525,000 in the ambulance revenue. I mean, I know that the recycling center is a huge loss leader. It in no way makes back what it costs us to run it. But here, we might not be at that point yet. But it would be an interesting exercise to see where that break point would be.
I wonder if that exercise, excuse me, if that exercise, which sounds worth doing, might trigger a provision in the firefighter's contract, the union contract. I don't pretend to be, excuse me, I don't pretend to be conversant in that contract, but I think it is worth examining the contract before trying to solve a problem and inadvertently creating a different and perhaps more consequential problem.
I think you've touched on something that we've been discussing because, in fact, the chief and I talked today about the difficulty he's having recruiting. I mean, just recruiting to begin with, so that's another issue that needs to be looked at.
At the same time, every fire department, certainly including Sturbridge's, must comply with the state law. Every time the ambulance leaves, it must have 2 qualified people in the vehicle. Not 1, 2. And for inbound and outbound in the last year, Sturbridge brought, turned to mutual aid 100 times. And it responded in mutual aid 15 times. While it's responding, and the ambulance has to go with 2 people, you could have the irony of responding on mutual aid and simultaneously calling for mutual aid. That's what happens when you have a smallish department. There are actually not enough people to turn out all the vehicles if needed at the same time. Some years ago, many people will remember the G&F fire, which was officially out of control for 27 hours, that had firefighting units from New Hampshire and the Navy base at Groton, New London, Connecticut. 127 firefighters on scene, people in hazmat suits, like space suits, walking straight into the fire. And that's not an everyday thing. That's probably a career event for most chiefs, maybe every chief, certainly in a town this size. But because the number of members of the department is so small compared to the continuing need, which can multiply, pardon the pun, by spontaneous combustion, helping another town can hurt this town in that the response could go to Charlton. No, they have to bounce it. It goes to Oxford, and on and on. The commander of the state, this is not fire, this is police. The commander of the state police barracks here one day called Sturbridge and said, "Do not misunderstand my call. You call us, we will come to help every time. But my, oh my, you are calling us a lot. What's up? We'll be there, but what's up?" So, where's the savings? Where's the loss? Where's the gain? When you're dealing sometimes with a literal handful of people.
Well, yeah, and if there's only, say, 3 on call, well, not on call, at work in any one day, which sometimes can happen because of vacation or sick or whatever. So 2 people go out in the ambulance, that person left behind can do absolutely nothing, because you, like you said, you have to have 2 on the ambulance. One person certainly can't go and fight a fire. So, yeah. So, honestly, I didn't think that I would be convinced by, because I've never done the fire department before. Mike's done it the last couple of years. I wasn't sure going in that I would be convinced that he needed more staff. I'm not sure he needs as much as he wants, but I think they do need more staff. Because when you think about it, 2 people out on an ambulance, they're going to say UMass instead of Southbridge. That's a long time. one person's left behind, you've got to call mutual aid if another call comes in.
And the ambulance goes down because it's got to be cleaned.
Oh, right. Oh, sure. They do have the spare, but,
And I do just cite the figure you used, because you didn't use the International Firefighters figure. You went to International Cities Managers
Yes, it was
Association.
ICMA.
And you said 1.52 per thousand.
I
and
Googled
that's-
it, you know.
Well, but that's 16 firefighters for Sturbridge.
yeah.
I just wanted to add to what Larry said, and I believe the chief explained this to us at least on one previous occasion. When an ambulance goes out and there's not enough to cover the second ambulance at the firehouse, the call goes out immediately to bring in coverage. And that's a major contributor to the overtime budget, because they're gonna bring somebody in, or maybe two people in, just in case they get a call. Now, if a call comes before they can fully staff it, then it goes out, but they still have to have that second ambulance covered while the first one is out. So I think he covered that with us in previous years, that's a contributor to the overtime cost.
Well, yeah, that's true too, but then you want to be calling in somebody who just
Who's
got
just
off,
there, and it may
Yeah,
never,
I
and
mean,
the other
so-
ambulance comes back, and then,
you know, they're,
but you have to have the coverage. I think
Yeah.
legally, we have to have the coverage.
So what are we saying we need more firefighters?
We need
We hire a firefighter paramedic, so they can staff the ambulance. Mike, you
Yeah, my last question, have we included any dollars in here for what the potential settlement of the contract is? Typically, we don't include any, or put any dollars to anticipate an answer for the contract settlement. And if we settle and we don't have enough funds in here, we come back and fund it another way.
I think that we have set aside money to support the town's position.
Okay.
Just a side note, you mentioned contracting it out. I could be mistaken, but I think the town of Webster does exactly that. They have
They
a
do have a-
contract relationship with an ambulance.
I know several towns that do that and do it successfully, but I agree with Bob. Some of it's the control issue, the political issue, it could be contractual issues, but many towns do that, partly for the reason of not being able to support all the town staff in order to do it. And feeling they have better control contractually, but, that ambulance rolls out, you got a company that's supposed to have a second crew rolling to your town available to pick up for them.
well,
I have just a comment, I guess. I look at 22 to 23 and the requested department, and on purchases is 39% increase, and on supplies it's 43% recommended. We give targets, I mean, that's pretty substantial percent-wise. And, since inflation's transitory, as we know, right? Maybe. But that seems to be dramatic, and then with what's recommended, it's 24% for services, even taking away the one-time software, it's 11%, which is, okay, above inflation, but quite a bit. And then on supplies, it's 16%. Those are pretty, I mean, why would a department head think that they can come in and request 39% more services and 43%? I mean, that's a significant amount of money, unless something unusual is happening one year.
But usually we don't give, in the past, we haven't given department head directives that says you
Targets.
can't do one. It's what do you think you need to run your department, and then we look at what we can afford to pay and then make the decision that, you want 6 firefighters and, 2,000 feet of hose. Well, we'll give you 2 firefighters and 1,000 feet of hose, because that's what works with the pie we have this year. It's never been like, you're limited to only increasing your budget by X percentage.
That's fair. So just tell us what you need, then we'll tell you what we can afford.
Pretty much. yeah.
Okay.
And I might just clarify that we as the finance committee don't provide that direction. It's usually the town administrator that in the past has typically told all department heads, budget time, give me another level funded budget, usually related to services. And they do, to the extent that they have a bunch of these one-time things or other things that come in and they feel they need. This is their opportunity to at least put forth what they feel they need in order to operate the department. That's why you see a difference between department requested administrators, that there is some discussion at that level to figure out what they feel is acceptable and want to come forward. And then, as Kevin said, our review on top of that.
Yeah, I mean, for example, there's the uniforms I believe they're new uniforms for, I don't know if it's for everyone, but it looks like it at 43.8, but the administrator's recommending 22.8, so, which would probably be about half of them, I assume then. Now, I did have a question that I didn't ask the chief. He's recommending 3.5 people, new people. What are you recommending in that number? You have a lesser number.
Well, aside from the deputy and the inspector, which was a replacement position, one additional firefighter, paramedic, and that's if we don't get the SAFER grant.
Right, right, okay.
Could I just jump in for a minute?
Sure, go ahead, Barbara.
I just wanted to clarify on the uniforms, the reason that the chiefs, if you're looking in the department request, the reason that number is so much higher than what was moved forward is because the chief was asking for all that additional staffing.
Oh. Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Thank you, Barbara.
And the other charges, dues, and memberships that, actually, that went down a bit. 4280 versus last year, 4600. I don't know, any other questions?
I don't see any. So the actual line item budget for the fire department is on page C7.
Okay, so that is, let's see,
1,951,506.
yes, 1,951,000. Oh, so I move that that the finance committee recommend to the town meeting for the fire department budget, the sum of 1,951,506.
Have a second?
I'll second.
Jim? Okay. Okay, first, any further discussion? All those in favor? Those opposed? That's unanimous, 7-0. And that concludes your
Good.
budget items?
Yeah.
All right. So Larry, we're up to you.
All right, sir, thank you. Let me invite the superintendent, Deb Boyd, and the Director of Business and Finance, Steve Nimberkow, please come to the podium, and while they're getting settled, a few words of background. These background observations are secondarily for the Finance Committee because some members know what I'm about to touch on. Others will be reminded, and there will be a few for whom it could well be news, and because of their tenure on this committee. So please do keep in mind that the schools have their own finance committee. It's called the Budget Subcommittee, and it meets regularly, and it meets with this committee's representative, in my own case this year and 4 or 5 other times I've had this assignment over the years, with open arms. So much so that in my experience in Burgess and at Tantascwa, I sit at the table with them. I'm not in the audience and raising my hand. They're very forthcoming, and it's just kind of a rolling discussion. Essentially, I'm the only one at the table, along with the executives, who does not vote. And that began last November. Of course, any budget is a description of a future intended, expressed in dollars that come in and dollars that go out over time. In education, it is a little bit like Old Man River that always is rolling along. I suggest beware of the difference between an annual snapshot and a movie, which shows better change over time. There was a last year, there'll be a next year. And these are investments in the rising generations. Candle makers and bakers and cops and doctors and Indian chiefs all come from the schools. So it's not melodramatic, I think, to say that the budget manufactures the future to the extent that people can control through their own decisions what happens. And everyone lives with the consequences. It's easy enough and wrong to reason or borrow from the private sector to the public sector when looking at budgets. There are a few reasons. One is the public sector does not have the competition that the private sector does. Keep in mind that whereas what's called FASB, Financial Accounting Standards Board, works in the private sector, it's GASB, government accounting, that is applicable, and there are differences. And without getting carried away, well, if you want to save and you're looking at accruals, they're not done the same way. So private sector experience doesn't always help. In the pursuit of the worthy effort of cost containment in the private sector, as in the public sector, efficiency counts. But keep in mind that when it comes to the schools in this state, the state tells every school district how little it must spend. So on the journey to cost containment, you can figure out a real nice way to do it, and it's just plain illegal. So be careful in borrowing. They're not strangers, the two systems, but they are very distant cousins. Keep also, if you will, in mind that there are many strengths, but there are two particular strengths of the education enterprise in which Sturbridge participates wholly, locally, and on a percentage basis regionally that are worth dwelling on. One is called school choice. It is the exact opposite of import and export. In export, you want to sell as much as you can. Well, in school choice, without disrupting or taking away a seat from a local student, the more students who come in, the more money that comes in, and that supports, for example, capital planning, capital works in the district. So school choice, the way it's working at Tantascwa for some years, is very flattering to the administration. It is, because close the windows, they're coming in the doors. And the other particular strength worth dwelling on just now, of the many, is special education. People move here because of the quality of special education. And that investment is dirt cheap next to sending a student out. If a student is going to go to a school elsewhere and owing to certain medical conditions, psychological conditions, other factors, it could cost this district, I know for a fact in the case of one school, $225,000 a year for residential care and education. Well, on Labor Day, a family can move into Sturbridge and has 3 students, each of whom is a special needs student. And so the budget has to do some gyrating to account for that. And nevertheless, in the face of that sort of predictable, unpredictable in the timing of it, nevertheless, people they appreciate, they value the special needs capability, which did not happen overnight. It was a brick-by-brick effort, sustained, and it is being kept at I think, a very high level. Also, at the district level, Sturbridge pays a percentage. That percentage is not 100%, but Sturbridge students get 100% of instruction and opportunities to learn and grow. Sturbridge students are not taught only to its participatory percentage in English composition. No, it doesn't work that way. In making year-to-year comparisons, please remember, COVID affects spending. Year to year, COVID affects spending. In technology, technology is no longer a nicety, it's a necessity. During the second ice age, I was the chair at Tantascwa, and in those days, the flaming issue was, should students have computers? Okay, each office can have a computer for the payroll or something, but computers for our kids? No, that's college or maybe graduate school. And that was a view. Another view which prevailed was that you ain't seen nothing yet, just watch. And so technology, which is not cheap, is cheaper than falling behind and trying to catch up. In a sense, you can never catch up. It is an infinity situation. Education is labor intensive. Education, if I haven't mentioned it, is labor intensive. In the private sector, you can have a room that is bigger than 75 basketball courts, and you can have 350 machines and 2 people keeping an eye on them. And every one of those machines is turning out profit. You cannot do that. It's a labor-intensive effort, and it's supposed to be. I mentioned the word value a moment ago. I believe now is the second year of a 5-year District Union 61 improvement plan. Well, when you look at a number, it means nothing by itself. $5,000 for a hamburger? Really? $5,000. A mint condition, 1956 Mercedes-Benz. That same 5,000 suddenly looks different. Understand education spending according to the value which plays out over future generations. Who do you think is going to take care of all of us when you all are as old as I am, and I give my age in Roman numerals? So, with those things in mind, let me, with the chair's permission, invite the observations, comments, and analysis of the superintendent and the director, and subject yourselves, if you will, to questions. Thank you.
Thanks, Larry. There's not a whole lot left to say, is there?
Thank you.
Queued up a lot. I'm just crossing things off on my list to talk about. Larry did a perfect job of pronouncing Steve Nembrico. For those who have not met him, he has been on since October. He is doing a lot of shadowing through our somewhat complicated budget process, but he has been a business manager, so he's certainly picking up speed pretty quickly. He very quickly, thank goodness, took a lot of burden off of my shoulders as I transitioned dealing with facilities and transportation and cafeteria. So I am still running a lot of the numbers, or at least presenting to you all. Steve and I are doing a lot of work so that I feel quite confident by July 1, he will have at least walked through this whole budget process and have 6 budgets that are his then to manage and start working with. But I'm very happy to have him with us. And those of you who didn't make it to public hearings, meet Steve.
Nice to see everyone.
Luck.
So he also here gets the joy of hearing us talk about 2 line items on every town meeting, which is issue number 1 that makes this a little bit complicated. But I don't know, what do you prefer, Kevin? Do you want me to kind of just give a synopsis on Burgess and Tantasco, or do you have specific questions or areas you want me to hone into?
No, why don't you give the synopsis? I have questions, but, you know,
Okay.
they're not anything too specific or
Okay.
anything. But yeah.
All right, I will attempt a high level, but Steve being with me hasn't changed me.
So Kevin, while she's doing that, the question I would have, because I missed your hearings, I know 2% roughly for each one seems like a reasonable increase. I don't have an issue with that, but I'd like to at least understand, within that, what were the things that were cost pressures that were driving things up high? And then obviously there were some things that were softening that increase, and what those
Yep.
were at a high level.
Yep. So Burgess, I'm going to start with all the positives, and I'm going to sneak in some negatives at the end, and then we're just going to move on to Tantasco. We are, and I was pretty happy to be at about a 2% level for Burgess. What we have going on at Burgess, what helped keep that down is we had a number of retirements, and we replaced them, but we replaced them at more entry levels, so that really helped a lot. And I was really happy that we had the retirements to help us actually begin getting off of the ESSER federal funding. So as we mentioned, so I guess a year ago when we met on our Saturday, then we were anxiously hoping to just turn into all-in teaching as opposed to the hybrid. This year, we spent most of our time trying desperately to have mask options, and I spent a lot of my time handing out free rapid tests. But we're certainly in a good place as school communities. Good things are starting to happen. Kids are starting to stabilize. Mental health has been a huge issue. And I can't say just for students, for students and staff and adults in the past year, we anticipated the need for additional mental health support and adjustment counseling. We did not anticipate it to the level that we actually ended up getting. When students started coming in and we tried to regulate them and get to a stable place where they can be good learners, we struggled, and we continue to struggle. And in some areas, we found students that we were not able to serve in-house and needed to have placements recently, which is kind of where I'm going to end in a minute. But the budget that we presented at the time we presented, we were able, because of retirements, to get into the budget a couple of things, a little bit of adjustment counselor support that we had state funding. We still are relying for the next 2 years. ESSER funds will continue to fund an adjustment counselor and a team chair for coordinating some of the adjustment counselor and meetings. And we got into the budget an English learner teacher that was in ESSER in year 1. The population, the L population, is increasing across the state, but has really started hitting our district. So we did this year fund a teacher from the ESSER funds. We did get that into the budget for next year, so at least that's not a cliff sitting there to wait. We made it very clear when we built our sort of 3-year plan that there'd be some things we felt in the end of 3 years we were still going to need to get into the budget, and some things that we hoped after 3 years, hopefully we wouldn't need maybe that additional adjustment counselor that we anticipated. So it's a little too early to know, and we've got 2 years left of these funds. But we did start, part of what we were able to put in the budget, the quote drivers, is getting some of the things in that we had used grant funding for this year. So we got a few things in, and I feel pretty good about that. And we're able to have retirements that helped fund that. The unknowns that, or the unknowns we didn't have the complete knowledge of at the time that we built the budget are in the area of utilities. So I did mention at public hearing, I am a little concerned with the heating oil line. At the time, we certainly budgeted an increase. We did not budget near what we ended up with, and what we ended up with is still better. We got a $2.90 rate, which, right, thank goodness we locked into that in January, February. Hopefully, things will level off a bit, but the gas prices are also impacting our transportation costs, both our regular ed with the big buses as well as the special ed. So we're seeing that. In fact, we just came from an elementary school committee meeting, and kind of queued them up that this year's budget, that is looking like the transportation lines are concerning me a little bit, that I think we'll get through, because there's other areas, we had some staffing turnover. Staffing has been a challenge this year, as you just turn on the news and know it's a huge challenge to keep us staffed, but we got through those really horrible surge periods. We did not close down, we kept it going. So we are starting to feel a little bit of relief. So I think the Burgess, other than the utilities, special ed was fairly stable as far as the out-of-district tuitions. We've done a great job with our programs, and I appreciate the shout out, Larry, because we are proud of the programs we have at every level that keeps as many of our students in where they should be with their peers. So what we presented to you in March was fairly level in the out-of-district tuitions. We since then have turned into a problem. We have since then had, in the last month and a half, we have had 4 out-of-district placements. Now, the reminder, and for the new ones, the elementary school is where all out-of-district placements are. So even if they're secondary, so we've had 4, but they're not all elementary. They're Sturbridge students at various different grade level that we could not serve.
Okay.
But those tuitions will be only in the elementary budget to make sure Sturbridge and Sturbridge's loan are paying for their own tuitions. They're going to result in more transportation also. They're not all, there's not 4 separate runs. I think there's 2 or 3 more, because at least 1 or 2 of them were going to places that we're already going to. So it's something we're watching. I would be very panicked right now if we haven't also in the last month got 2 more retirement notices. So I'm just telling you, I'm optimistic. We're kind of working those numbers. If we get to September, October, I can remember 1 or 2 times in my 20 years that I sort of queued you up in October, November, things are looking bad. And once we put an article in just in case we needed it, we got to the end of the year and we were okay. So right now I'm a little concerned. I'm not panicked yet, but that's out there. And we'll keep working it because a lot changes.
Assuming at a dish, you have no control over that.
You don't. And I mean, the only control we have is how hard we work with the students before we get to a point where we can't, where we're not the best place to serve them, given where they are.
It's a battle, isn't it?
It is, and it makes us so sad when we finally get to the point, but we have to admit at some point in time, we cannot serve them right here. We have to put them in the right placement to do best by them, and sometimes they come back. Sometimes, depending on the placement, after a year or 2, we can get them back into some of our in-house programs or integrated. We're definitely having a lot of mental health and behavioral issues that have been a challenge. It's a different problem. We're going to keep working at it. We may fill you in another year or 2 that we've got a new program that we want to build in-house. So we're looking at that, but.
They're expensive, what is it, $50,000, $60,000
The
plus?
cheapest outgoing, these days, the cheapest outgoing is $48,000-$50,000.
Yeah, I'm familiar with
To Larry said, 250 is not common, but it happens, and those are usually residential placements. The only, again, positive spin would be if things don't break. The state does fund, there's a pretty complicated formula. There's a circuit breaker formula to fund but it's a reimbursement model with special ed tuition. So if we incur as much as it looks like we're going to incur the year after next, we'll probably get an increase in circuit breaker state funding. So I'm hoping that doesn't mean I'm bumping all of that into the budget the year after. I'm looking to try and get through next year and hope the year after, we're gonna be able to level off between, between salary changes and retirements and the state reimbursement. So I think we've covered kind of where Burgess was in a really good, I was very excited, 2%, and then the last month and a half, I'm a little bit nervous, but we're gonna move forward optimistically. This year, you've got 852 students at Burgess, enrollment declining slightly from 2 years ago, up from last year, because we certainly had a good population last year that was either homeschooling or kindergartners. You don't legally have to come for kindergarten, so we had a number of families that just chose not to send their children. So a good amount came back. I don't know that I think there's still a little bit of homeschooling going on there, but we do in general, even if they all come back, we are experiencing what Massachusetts has been experiencing, a little bit of a declining enrollment. Yeah. Trying to see what else I have on Burgess before I move on to Tantascwa. So I did mention, we got the L teacher. The other things that we'll be doing for the next 2 years for the federal funds, we've kind of been in the mental health adjustment counselor area, technology, and the L support and any HVAC facilities issues, which Burgess is in really good shape. So I don't anticipate in the next 2 years needing any capital HVAC-related items. So those federal grants will be used, we'll be able to use the money to continue to ramp up, replace smart boards from a technology point of view. We're going to need to replace the Wi-Fi access points pretty soon, so we'll be able to use those funds, and that won't need to go into the regular budget of the capital. So that's the good news, especially as we wean off of the salary-related things from the grants, that we're not looking to replace the remaining federal funds with salary items. We're looking for, one-time purchase items.
Do you see long-term, like 5 years down the road, like for buses, EV will kick in here somewhere? Because it's a perfect place to put you plug it in and you only need it for so
Yeah,
many
well, and
hours.
especially I know you got a project going on in town, so it'll be very interesting to see how that goes. The mechanic did recently look at some of the new units, and we're not there yet. It's not something that would be cost-effective or feasible for us yet. Down the road, especially if you've got a facility in town that would help in the charging, but we're not there.
Along those lines, how about like solar for eventually down? Is there any way for facilities could do with solar or a project for oil? Or it's not going to get cheaper, it might be more, who knows?
Tantascwa has some solar panels on both buildings. We've looked a little bit at Burgess, but we were also coupled with, in fact, your last town administrator looked at things a little bit with us, because we're coupling the solar panels with your net metering credits. And I know you've got a couple of net metering credit commitments, and part of Burgess's use is also on that. We've got net metering credits also up at Tantascwa. So we needed to look at what we were committed, because I don't want to be over-committed and then need to be worrying about selling off net metering credits because our utilization goes down from solar panels. But I think we've got what we can at Tantascwa. I'd love to look at down the road, Steve and I have talked about parking lot canopies.
Yeah,
So that's sort of on our radar now that
Like
we're kind of getting out of the COVID fog and be able to focus on other things. Yeah,
good.
I'd like to do that.
Can I ask a question about the fields at Burgess? Because it seems like I hear recreation talking about that they don't get a lot of access to them, they're not in good shape. So what is the story there?
Well, it's interesting because the problem is we have too much requests for the fields.
Right.
So we've got school staff spending way too much time trying to coordinate use of the fields. Now, they can't have access when we have, during the school day or immediately after school when the extended day program is still in place. COVID should have given all the fields a nice little rest, but some fields, we definitely have struggled with a couple of fields, and it might be the soil makeup keeping them the upkeep has been challenged on a couple of Burgess fields. And I would argue it's more the amount of use than lack of use. They're always used. But I know where, I believe the Burgess staff is working with the town and the town administrator on both reverberation potential plans. Is there ARPA money that's gonna be used for?
I thought they were going to do the,
Yeah, right.
Bob
So-
just raised his hand too. Did you have a comment you wanted to add there?
Yeah,
I walked the
the,
fields,
I
yes,
mean-
the other day, yeah.
I met with Paul and, you know, he submitted some quotes. The ARPA committee approved $75,000 for the Burgess Field, the selectmen approved that. I don't wanna speak for them, but I think they're quite happy with getting that ARPA money. I think that's more than just soil treatments that they need. And my understanding is there was a problem with the way the fields were constructed in the first place, so I think they're gonna try and remedy that with that money.
And we have not really been able to do it at Tantascwa Fields. There's a total of like 7 fields, so we usually try to rotate. Now, we put 2 of them, the synthetic turf, at least took those out of the rotation need, but every 5 to 7 years, we're gonna take one out and refurbish. We haven't really done that at Burgess, because the need is there. You take one out and, you know, the world ends because there's one less field available. But we definitely, especially if we go through the refurbish, and Steve has been involved and walked the fields recently, there definitely has been a problem keeping them up, and they may very well be the initial build of them, and that is just not my area of expertise, but we are committed to have a maintenance plan and followed by our staff.
Yeah, I took a look at them the other day and walked them with the grounds crew over there. A lot of the problem is whatever fill they put down in the infields, it was full of rock. So that makes the field, if you're a kid and you're sliding in the second and that it's not a, you'd come up with a few rocks in your arms and your pants there. So they had the tiller out there before the rain on Monday. They're gonna till it up, and then we're gonna take a look and to decide if we wanna get some more clean fill for those infield areas. We can make them look nice for this year. Apparently, the lower field is very wet over there, so there's not a lot we can do to keep that. We'll try to do that the best shape that we can, but we have made that a priority this year to make the fields as presentable as possible. But with the 75,000 redoing the fields, I think that'll go a long way to digging everything up, putting down new loam, putting down new grass, putting down new infields, new bases, things like that. We'll be able to do that. The fencing there is magnificent. It's in wonderful shape, the fencing and the dugouts and everything. So that worked out very well. It's just the condition of the fields that we need to work on.
and how many are there again? Refresh my memory, because it changed.
1, 2, 3, and then a lower
The
field, 4.
lower.
Oh, there's 4, okay.
And they're gonna start using School Dude for scheduling. So there'll be a scheduling program to help out with that.
Oh, good. Okay, thank you.
Larry referred to the district improvement plan, which we did have copies at the Tantascwa public hearing, so I don't want to be repetitive if any of you were there. I have it. And really, this year is year 1. It should have been a document that started in 2021, but 2020 happened and we didn't get it all completed. So this is actually year 1. But the key areas in the district improvement plan, the curriculum based is certainly to increase student achievement and do typical curriculum revisions. So included in the Tantascwa budget is a new math curriculum at the junior high level that will be moving down next year. We'll be looking to budget at the elementary level. And visual arts was up this year. The other big thing in the district improvement plan is technology, twofold, to continue to use the technology that we got a great infusion of and were forced to pivot pretty quickly to in COVID, and thank goodness, only a year before COVID did we move to the Google world. And we were a little behind on that. There was, we waited a little bit to see if Windows was going to have a product, I think is it Windows 360, that had some comparable sharing product, and ultimately, we went Google the year before. So we did not have a full staff that had fully embraced the Google world, but boy, did they pretty quickly when we were forced to be working first completely remotely and then a half and half, a hybrid world. So now we're back in, and it's time to actually figure out how best to integrate all of that technology into the classroom and not have technology just for the sake of having technology. So that is definitely something that we have as a plan over the next couple of years, is to make sure we're using it appropriately and taking advantage of the new opportunities. We also will be replacing the student information system. So that is the hub of the tracking every student and every staff member, and it connects to the Department of Ed. So it sends all the data to the Department of Ed on coursework, on staffing levels, attendance levels, and what we have had for, I'm going to go 15 years or so, is a product that is not supported very well. It's becoming somewhat obsolete. We have outages and a lot of frustrations. One of the modules that we desperately want to use in a student information system is the direct parent-to-teacher contact, and the current system we have does not have a good parent portal that the parent can just log in and see their students' work and see their students' grades and even communicate with the teacher as opposed to going to email and asking or having the meeting. So that is something that we're in the middle of piloting right now. There's a handful of pretty standard education-based student information programs. We're down to 2. We're piloting it in the various different users and stakeholders, and it'll be implemented next year. So we did, in the central office budget, have to budget for the cost of it in general will go up a little bit annually, but more importantly, the transition from one to another and all of the painstaking training and trying to be cheerleaders of the staff who don't want to learn new things. But we'll be going through that next year, and that is part of the district improvement plan, to do that over the next 2 years. And then to concentrate on the social emotional, the mental health, and really try and equity, and make sure equity is every single child. It's kind of going back to basics, in my opinion. We've always really focused on equity and making sure every student is getting what they need and an ability to learn to the best of their capabilities. It's in special needs, it's in low income, it's in various diverse groups that we really need to focus on. So those are kind of the key areas of the district improvement plan, and those are the things that we've certainly tried to weave into our budgets. Tantascwa? Or do you want, or do you have any, you have any
So that
specific
district
purchase?
improvement plan is, I would imagine, is all
It's
school.
all
the
encompassing.
schools. Yeah,
It's
okay.
all encompassing, and I'm happy for any of you want, how many pages is this thing? It's not a whole lot. 11. It's an 11-page document. I'm happy to, you could have this one when we leave, and if anyone wants it electronically, I'm happy to send it to you.
Please.
Yeah, there's a good, there's 5 major goals with a number of action items and objectives underneath there and kind of dates, so you'll probably like that.
How do we rank, by the way, as far as like towns and stuff? Are we improving the same, better? Because I agree with what Larry said, and people do move into towns for education, for sure, like 100%. It's so important.
Rankings are interesting because, at any given day, you could see a newspaper article where we rank 2 or we rank 100. It really depends on what they're looking at. It really does. And I see so many different, we certainly, and we consistently are certainly above state average. And, in central Mass, we're higher up. We're in good shape.
Good.
It'll be interesting when we're getting back to true standard assessments for the last 2 years. So 2020, we did not administer MCAS at all. 2021, we did, with a clear understanding of we were just using that for benchmark data and to try and see where the kids are. We didn't have any accountability attached to it from a state point of view, and it was a challenge to administer when you were in a hybrid world. So you had to figure out how to administer it. You know, it took twice as long to do, or kids who were fully at home, they were not forced to come and take it, but we wanted to allow them to and hoped they could. So this year now, in fact, this week, we've been doing MCAS testing, will really be the first true picture of, and again, we don't anticipate to be where we were 2 years ago. We anticipate to find out we still have work to do, but I think I'm optimistic in thinking, I think we're gonna be in better shape than folks thought we'd be. We get in and, you know, we keep the rigor going at the same time as trying to recognize that students' mental health and students' general environment counts. They've got to be comfortable to learn before they can learn. So the message this year has been to give the teachers the ability to say, sometimes you do take your foot off the pedal a little bit to make sure that your classroom is where it needs to be and ready to learn, but hit the pedal. Any Burgess specific questions?
More of my questions are all district, which would include both schools, so go ahead.
Okay, all right. Tantascwa budget is up a little over 4%. And the drivers there are somewhat similar. The moving things off of the federal funds into the budget. And what we were able to move into the budget was the junior high nurse assistant, which pre-COVID, we were trying to get a nurse assistant. There was only one nurse in the junior high, and we really needed it. And especially when we have the special needs programs that does have a medically involved population, it really was important to get that nurse assistant in. So we finally got it into the budget as opposed to being grant funded for a couple of years. We had 1.25 adjustment counselors from the federal grant. The 0.25 we got into the budget, that was a 0.75 employee who we were able to move up to 0.25 this year, and now we have that in the budget. We did add a custodian this year to keep up with general COVID sanitation, and now going to continue. We certainly put a number of practices in place from a sanitary point of view, from an HVAC point of view, that we want to keep. And we put a teacher that was grant funded back into the budget. Those of you might remember 2020 when we closed down as we were building budgets, and we were all quite concerned as to what the fiscal 21 budget was going to look like. We were worried about getting 20% cuts in Chapter 70. At that time, there were 3 retirements at Tantascwa. We didn't replace any of the 3 to keep the budget down because we were so worried about what would happen from state funding. So for the current year, we funded 2 of those positions with ESSER funds. For next year, we got 1 of those teachers into the budget, and the other one will continue to be federal funded, and hopefully we can get that back in next year. The other big hit that we took at the Tantascwa budget was in insurance, in the liability insurance, because our claims from, it feels like forever ago, I think it was maybe 4 years ago, on the flood that happened in the field house over Thanksgiving break, that claim finally caught up to us in terms of premium. So that when they look at our history, I think I've still got that on our history for 1 more year. And we took a hit this year. We're taking another hit next year. So we had a kind of a double bump on that line. If you look at the liability line, it's about 2 years worth of increase in premium. And then hopefully the year after that, it'll level off a little bit because we are paying for that bad experience. But while we had that increase of 4%, we got a significant increase in Chapter 70 money, as did Sturbridge. Sturbridge got a big bump too. The big bumps in Chapter 70 are almost all because of the increased L population and low-income population.
Would you explain Chapter 70, which is a term of art for many people?
Sure. Chapter 70 is your state funding, specifically school-related. So overall, the state sets every single year, they calculate what the bare minimum can be spent on schools, and then they calculate based on their formula that many in this room, hey, and I completely understand, how much they're going to pay, the state, and how much the community has to pay for the difference. I sit here and absolutely acknowledge and thank this community has always funded over net school spending. We've never been sitting here having a conversation saying, this is how much it went up and you've got to pay at least that much. There are absolutely towns out there that have that fight every year and only want to pay to the minimum required contribution.
Okay, so you get to my first district question, so we'll go there. You know, echoing Larry's comments from the beginning.
Yep.
And like you just said.
Yeah.
You know, the town is giving the school everything they need, and we've got great value in return. Just curiosity has me asking, what's our percentage over foundation budget for both schools?
Burgess is probably about 30%. State average is 17, between 17 and 20 over the last couple of years. Used to be around 20, but I think it's gone down a little. I think it's gone down a little because grant funds are kind of plugging holes in some state communities. But Burgess is absolutely about 30% over net school spending requirement. Tantascwa is only 16% over net school spending required, which you would certainly expect. The reason you are in a region is to get the best bang for your buck is when you can certainly offer services. The more you have, it's a question of volume, and the more you have, the cheaper you can do it. It's actually pretty impressive. When I looked, I don't think 21 data is up yet. I think it's 20 data that had a per pupil expenditure for Burgess of $14,000, Tantascwa of $14,800, and $13,200. Now, $13,200 for your secondary is pretty impressive, given secondary schools are usually more expensive per student, given all of the bells and whistles that happen at a secondary and the subject-specific needs. And your secondary school has a technical division, which is usually much higher
So that
than the average.
includes that? That
Yes.
encompasses the, whoa,
Yep.
that is low.
And if I may break in just to observe, the discussion is not on $130 or on $116. You got to spend the 100 either way. It's on 30 and 16, and what that marginal increase purchases synergistically with the first 100. That's the discussion. And that is called high value.
It is. What I have not gone through yet this year, Kevin, is the exercise to say, Burgess is about 30% over, but remember, Burgess holds all of your out-of-district tuition costs. So reality, if I pull half of that out and put it in Tantascwa, you're gonna be high 20s and high teens for Tantascwa. So that, so it is very hard. This district is, sorry, Steve, please keep coming back. It is, there's so many kind of weird complexities in this district, and the union versus the district, and our regional agreement being just a 7 through 12. You go next door and you've got one line item in the Dudley Charlton district, you go and you just do one line. So we've got these nuances that make it hard to compare data. When you go out there and look at some of the comparisons in other districts, we have to keep reminding ourselves of what's a little bit different and unique. We have a tech division, most high schools do not. They technically call that a technical school. That building has 2 schools in it. When you go and look at MCAS data, there will be MCAS data for the Tantascwa Regional High School and for the Tantascwa Regional Technical School. So it is a bit complicated. But we get it done. What else?
Last
What-
time you
what-
and I spoke, I think you said that you were looking at 9 labor negotiations
Yeah.
at once.
Basketball contracts.
I'm in the middle of them now.
So is there, without getting into substance and strategy, is there anything you can talk about demand on time, your budget of time, and anything else that would be of use in appreciating what the $20 million is about?
Yeah, there are 15 contracts across the district. I have 15. They fall 3, 3, and 9, and this is a 9-year. So I'm in the middle of 9 contracts. I have 1 tentative agreement. Burgess has the support staff negotiating. We have done what I just heard earlier with the question on what's in the budget. We budget, from our perspective, what we think, we put a pool of dollars in. So the budget we've presented on Burgess and Tantascwa has an anticipated pool of dollars. Yes, we could end up a bit short, but I know what that pool of dollars is, and we make that very much a part of negotiations to say, this is what we have. Let's figure out how to spend it. So Sturbridge support staff are negotiating. Tantascwa has 3. They have their support staff, their classroom assistants, their the bookkeepers and secretaries, administrative assistants are in a unit, and their custodial and cafeteria folks are in a unit. So of those 3, only one of them has even started. So the others will start soon, I hope. In my tenure, and that's over 20 years, have never started a July 1 or a school year without a contract settled. I'm a little nervous, but, there's still 2 months to go, so we'll see. It's a very, very busy schedule. It's just the luck of the draw that this year of all years, as we're trying to, Steve is, again, he's observing some of them, but we're not to the point yet where I can say you can have a couple of them, so we're marching along. But we have put a pool of dollars for each unit in the budgets that we've presented to you.
All right, so, I'm just curious, obviously you present Sturbridge's town share here for the regional budget. And almost always when I don't know, I was unfortunately couldn't attend the public hearing this year, but usually there's 1, maybe 2 towns that, cry poverty and
Yes.
can't do it.
Yes.
Is that happening this year?
Yes.
Okay.
Brimfield.
Brimfield, right?
Brimfield.
I was at the hearing.
Brimfield's the problem child this year, but I will work with them. The balance is always the secondary plus the elementary. I combine it together and say, what are schools asking from the town? The elementary is a bit lower than Tantascwa, and the last couple of years, Brimfield has actually been in that made-out area, so I will have to remind them of that.
So in the percentages, distributed among the 5 towns, I mean, have we seen real changes in those percentages? Sturbridge historically is 50, 51%, something like that.
Yeah.
Are these other towns starting to see more growth where they're taking up?
Yeah, it's very rarely is there more than a 1% swing, but 1% can be a lot.
Yeah.
The bigger shifts are usually behind the scenes before you get to that with that net school spending or the minimum contribution. The bigger shifts are those smaller schools, and often that's what I have to show them, is the smaller schools, if they have a large class size that leaves 6th grade and comes up to Tantascwa, the way the state funding works is they figure out how much each town has to spend at least on education. And then they divide that out by your school districts. For you, it's 2. If it's a K through 12, they don't need to divide that out. But they divvy it out by enrollment, by student share. So if one of the small towns has a bump up at the secondary, that's the reason that the secondary minimum contribution is increasing and their assessment is increasing. And I've got to explain, which is unfortunate because it's not like it's easy to take it out of the elementary. If you've got Wales has got one class per grade. There's only so much you can do there. But that tends to be some of the problem, is it's their enrollment shifts and the minimum contribution. And again, Their wealth-based formula might change a little bit, but that doesn't change a lot for any place other than Brimfield.
Okay. You talked about, Burgess, you're not seeing any capital costs there or anything like that because the building's still relatively new in Steam's Hole. Now, Tantascwa is 20-plus years old now. Are we starting to see capital costs and infrastructure costs going up in that building?
Absolutely. And as Larry said, it has not gone in the budget yet. It has been school choice funded. So school choice, Tantascwa continues to take in about $1 million a year in school choice. This year, a month ago, I was a little worried because the applications for the 7th grade were lower than I thought, than they've been in a while. So I kind of served up school choice and said, the school committee, and said, this might be the beginning of, we got to be careful, and because enrollment across the state has decreased, and a number of other things. But in the last month, we got another dozen applications. So April 1st was the deadline, and there were a number of them that came in last minute. So ultimately, we might take in a few less at 7th grade than we took at 8th, but it's fairly comparable. So $1 million a year in school choice, what we have been doing for a number of years now is put about $300,000 of it towards your operation assessment to lower it before sending it out. And the rest is all for the capital funding. Now, that's $700,000 that we absolutely could sit here and say, if it didn't have school choice, I would need to be going to the towns for. I'm spitballing right now. I would say of that 700,000, 500 at least is essential as opposed to extras. So we definitely, and included in that capital is our technology. So our capital plan is for both schools. Each school has a technology page and a facilities or other page.
When you say both schools in this case, you mean the junior high and the
Correct.
senior high school and not
Correct.
the high school and the technical school?
Exactly. So Burgess does have capital items in there. You've got your networking, your hardware, I think, $100,000 or so. That line doesn't exist in either of your Tantascwa building budgets. It's funded in the capital plan, which has been funded with school choice for a number of years.
Okay. And my last question, I had asked this last week when the police chief was here, when we were meeting with the Board of Selectmen, because they're looking for additional personnel, and I'm just looking at the school's position on the need and/or want of school resource officers.
We love
in
the
both.
school resource officers. We love them. We've had a little change in staffing, but we work very well. Our principals are very appreciative, and those of you who have been here for a while knew it took us a while to get there. It took our school committee a while to accept a school resource officer and get a comfort level that they are truly a resource. They're not there to police their resources, and our principals really appreciate that and use them appropriately, and every now and then it's okay, this is a policing time, or this is a legal issue, you go and do what you're supposed to do. But the Tantascwa principals, I think, would be quite disappointed if we didn't have them, and I know the elementary would. And we have committed our neighbors, our other Union 61 towns and school committees have done what they promised to do. So we continue each year in each of the 4 elementary budgets to put SRO money that is specifically for additional police funding for elementary as well as Tantascwa. And the police chiefs have gotten to SRO, and we make it a point. We don't allow police officers in unless they have been SRO trained, because we really like the program. And we meet the officers before, if there's a new one coming in, we want to meet them first. But the other towns,
Can I ask, when you say "we" there, is it just you as the administration, or do you mean the school committees as well?
at this point in time, it's just the administrator. If there's a new one, and the chiefs know that they're going to bring whoever they, in some cases, they're not trained yet. Before they're even trained, they will bring them to the superintendent. We chat, we make sure we're comfortable, which we almost always are. Or we'll ask a couple of questions, and then they go off and get trained.
You know, or maybe you don't, for those who don't, it is not a particularly attractive history that brought us to a desirable present with the school resource officers. The school committees, and you know, a slow motion turnover, 17, 18 people. But the adults did not want to publicly admit that they needed help. And so you'd hear things like, this isn't Chicago. Like there's a Great Wall of China around here, you know? And it took a lot of determination and patience and cooperation, the administration, the then Chief Ford of the Sturbridge Police Department, and patrol officers who were really willing to learn about dealing with a kid who just doesn't get breakfast and who's got blood level swings and kicks the cat because an older sibling kicks that kid, and on and on. And dealing with kids who they're 7 years old and they wear a football helmet because they'd kill themselves if they kept banging their head against the wall in the school. So there are men and kids on crutches. The crutch is this is a short little crutch because the kid's a short little person. And the school committee did not like it when they were asked, okay, who of you wants to speak on behalf of the district at the funeral? Well, little by little, it turned around, and you're now overseeing a first-rate operation, I think.
Yeah, I think it works, and it, again, school committee were a little hesitant. And I wouldn't say it was without a couple of bumps. I think police officers are trained in certain ways, and when you see certain behaviors in the students, it takes a while for a police officer to understand. You know, say it's a student in one of our special needs programs, they're acting in a certain way that, if you didn't know that, an officer would respond in a certain way. And it takes a little while for them to understand. We as administrators and the classroom staff know how to handle that. Hold on, we can get there, but they definitely get involved when we need them involved. Yep.
Okay. Anybody else?
I had a question. I'd like to just step back for a second to the school choice. You had mentioned the $1 million figure, and this is more of a risk question than anything else. Is there any particular school system that's contributing a substantial number of students as opposed in that pool of $1 million? And how vulnerable are we if there, for instance, was an improvement in that particular school system that dried up that source of? I don't want you to be specific as to any town, but I want to know, is there a substantial number coming from one single school system?
There are probably 3 or 4 districts that are pretty comparable. So there's not one that is leaps and bounds above. There are 3 for sure, I don't know the numbers on the 4th, but 3 for sure that have the bulk of it, and then we get some tricklings, and we get some from, crazy places that, most likely, we have employees who may live fairly far away and put their child in the lottery and got it in because they're coming in with their child. You look at the list and you're like, who is coming from there? And that's likely. Then we've got the same thing. We've got very few outgoing, but we've got one really far away. That's absolutely going to be a parent. The outgoing school choice, we have we have very few outgoing school choice going to another brick and mortar school. We have a significant uptick in the virtual schools. That continues to be the thing.
And the drug high school?
Excuse me?
Isn't there a high school virtual, but for students who are drug addicts?
There's a recovery school that I think is important, but we don't get that often. You probably see there's, Tecca and, Gateway, is it Gateway or Greenfield?
Greenfield Virtual Academy.
Greenfield Virtual Academy. That, sometimes folks just think that is, in the last couple of years, I think we've seen a bit of an uptick on those students who are just struggling emotionally or anxiety-driven and are doing the virtual, and if it's working for them, that's fine. Unfortunately, we pay a higher amount than the flat 5,000 for those virtuals, which is confusing to me, but it's a little bit more, it's about 8,000 a student instead of 5, so that's like a double hit. We've got a few more of those, and they cost more, but that is in our budget. So it's a budget line for those out-of-district tuitions, but there are very few of them that go to, if they're gonna be in a school, in a brick-and-mortar school, we have very few that choose to leave the district.
You have many going to the charter school? Is that upticking at all as they
We
increase
don't at
in grades?
Tantascwa, so here's the bad news and the good news. Your charter enrollment has continued to keep ticking up a little bit, and my numbers look, I think 5 more kindergartners got in this year. So that continues to be more confusing than, I think you've got a total of 20-ish, K through 6. The good news is they applied this year to expand up to high school, up to grade 12, and increase another 40 per grade, K through 8.
That was my next question.
It got denied,
Oh,
so,
all of it?
yep,
So they won't be
no
going to
expansion
high
at all,
school? Oh,
this year anyway.
So they're not competing with us at the middle school and the high school level then?
Their
yet.
current goes to grade 8.
So they are a little bit with the
They
middle
are.
school.
Now, this year we're in is the first year that the students are eligible, they're grade 7. They've rolled up to grade 7. We had 4 district-wide, so not Sturbridge, I don't even know what towns at this
Okay.
point in time. We had 4 6th graders last year district-wide. We did reach out to them and say, what's your plan? Do you want to come in at 7th grade? Because you're going to have to make a decision at 12th grade if you want to come and have a tour or come join the new student orientation to get a feel for it. You're welcome to. 2 of them came. So we've got 2 that Tantascwa is paying for, and that will start rolling up now every year. We'll have a few more. We'll have what Sturbridge has been going through, and we'll need to budget that in our budget.
In my opinion, just an observation, the physical facility from the 7th grade up should be a real attraction to these students who
Yep.
have to decide which way they want to go.
You know,
Because that has nothing to offer compared to,
and if nothing else, the extracurricular activities that,
yes.
I think are so valuable for kids when they get to that point. But whatever works best for the children, it's
Yeah,
their choice. I have one more topic if you don't have any more questions.
Does pensions play any kind of role in the budget, or is that all state?
Pensions, it's state.
So we don't have any
Well-
issues with that?
No, the Mass Teachers Retirement is state-funded.
Yeah.
Worcester County retirement for the non-teachers is a budget item for Tantascwa as well as the town. And that's everyone but teachers.
And there's no, with new people coming on board, there's no 403Bs, which would replace future budgets, like you see, there's no such thing like
No,
that in
it's us having to pay our share of the Worcester County retirement, and we certainly offer, we don't pay any of it, but we offer 403B investment plans.
Okay.
You're all eligible for a defined benefit plan.
The defined benefit
The
versus
old
defined
style pension
contribution.
plans.
Yeah, I
Yep.
hear you.
Yep.
Yep.
Tantascwa was also contributing, as is Sturbridge, to an OPEB plan, so that's another line item that you'll see in Tantascwa's budget.
So you had one more topic?
I wanted to make sure we talked about transportation and the article. You have an article someplace.
You
So,
mean a town meeting warrant article?
yes,
Okay, wait,
Oh.
it hasn't gotten to us.
okay. I'll come back when the time comes if you'd like, but if I can hit it now, I'd like to hit it.
No, please.
So have all of you been in the general DPW area, or if any of you have not? Great. So you know, a couple of years ago, there's a trailer that's now outside of the DPW that houses the transportation staff. So that was put there, and so thankful for the offer from the town, and the DPW director, Butch, reached out and said, hey, what do you think? And yes, it was COVID. It was COVID money, and it was COVID, why don't we do this? There is a very tiny office in the garage that used to house everything to do with buses, the mechanic's desk, the coordinator, the assistant coordinator, and bus drivers in and out there all the time. There's 20 bus drivers, 2 trainers, the coordinator, and the mechanic. So we were very grateful that the town said, hey, we've got some money, can we put this trailer up? Would kind of help things a little bit. In retrospect, I don't know why we didn't think to do it years ago, because it really isn't just a COVID situation. It has allowed folks to have, we used to go to the public safety complex for meetings and trainings. And training, they've got to have a certain number of hours every month. They're in and out, they're in and out 4 times. Some of them use the restroom, have some quick chats with the director, or go through their time cards, et cetera. The town paid for a little more than a year worth of, it's a lease. The school committee agreed, I think the town funds ran out in December, and the school committee agreed to pick up the rest through June. But as of June, the funding's gone, the trailer goes away, and we go back to trying to work out of a teeny tiny office and find places to meet. And honestly, from a safety perspective, with the lifts and the large vehicles that are being worked on in there, it's just not safe. We put in an article, school committee supported and voted to submit an article the article is for $200,000 to purchase a trailer. We tried to get, it's this world. We have, the lease has been about $2,500 a month. So close to $30,000 a year. We're a year and a half into it, almost 2 years. We tried a number of times to get the vendor that we're leasing from to let us buy it. They have no interest. Butch Jackson tried, Steve tried, called 3 steps up the ladder. They won't. They won't. They say, nope, we don't want to sell it. We'll just keep renting it. They're in high demand. So we stopped with that vendor.
Yeah.
Butch Jackson was successful a number of months ago. I don't know what the price would be now, but back in January or so when we were first talking about this, he had a quote of, I think, $165,000. So I put the $200,000 in, knowing there'd be a little bit increase in price, but the cost of installing and connecting to the electric, we're gonna have to incur again. So that is the purpose for the article that I'm hoping you folks can support. Steve, every 3 to 4 years, we do the analysis to compare what we spend, what Sturbridge spends on regular ed transportation. And I'm fortunate enough to have actual data because the other 4 towns outsource, they happen to have McCarthy. So I know what they pay per bus and per student. And Steve updated that data, got the employee costs from Barbara to compare, and it is pretty consistent every year. Every 3 years, it's coming to almost the same thing, which is about, in totality, your elementary runs plus your Tantascwa, the town saves about $200,000 a year by running this in-house. It's the only reason we continue to do it, because it's exhausting, especially
Still do
this year.
2 buses per year replacement
Yes,
process.
yeah, and that is in the budget. So, and for those that are new, if you look in detail at the Burgess budget, you see the total cost of running the transportation operation, then you see a minus line, about half of it, that bill is going to Tantascwa, which is interesting, because I take that bill, and then I charge Sturbridge the transportation assessment after getting the state's reimbursement. So more complexities, but we're getting there.
That's true.
So we are asking for support. I know you won't be able to make that decision tonight, but wanted you to know what's going on behind that, it is certainly important to keep it in-house because it is cheaper, and I think it's the right thing to do for a number of departments, for not only those, the bus employees, but I think it's time to get them out of the little DPW space and have them stop using. I don't even know if the facility would still be available if we go back to the public safety complex to have the meetings.
Yeah, and with.
Probably not.
Right.
With transportation, the costs are just gonna keep rising. There's a lot of pressure on wages, there's a lot of gas pressure on that, so by having it in-house, you're saving a tremendous amount of money. Then on the special ed side, to transport one student to the eastern part of the state, it's about $40,000 a year to drive that child. So that's a very good deal on the other side too, with special ed transportation.
Well, thank you for the heads
That's
up.
my pitch for that, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay,
Anything
anybody
else?
else have questions or comments for the superintendent or the director? Well, thank you both for taking the time and coming.
Not a
address
problem at
us
all.
and
We
answer
am
our
always happy to
questions.
come visit. Sorry we missed last week. I think
very
you probably must have had a pretty busy night. Did you have all other departments last week?
No,
Was it a
just,
meeting with
just
Board of
the
Selectmen?
police chief, fire chief, IT director, and,
Somebody else.
yeah, there was one other one. Oh, Butch Jackson.
I was in highway.
Dir-
Yeah, that's right.
DPW
He was on,
director.
yeah.
Yeah,
The big ones.
yeah.
I'm glad we could make it this week.
So Larry, do you have a motion then?
I do.
Thank you.
I move the Finance Committee recommend to the annual town meeting a budget of $20,577,340 as proposed for Burgess, Tantascwa Junior High, Tantascwa Senior High, Tantascwa Vocational Technical School.
Do I have a second? Ken? Any further questions or comments? All those in favor? That's 7-0.
What was that number again? So that's all
7-0.
combined,
It's
yes?
unanimous, huh?
What was that number again?
20,577,340. That's the total.
It should have them all, the
Yeah.
transportation and the
Yes.
Tantascwa and the Burgess. Awesome,
That would be education total.
great. All righty.
Again, thank you for your time and your
Thank you
patience.
both.
Going.
And if I don't see you before, I'll see you at town meeting.
All right.
But if you could
I'm gonna
send
leave it
those
for you.
along electronically too, that
I'll
would be
leave you the
great.
hard copy.
All right, great. Thank you very much. Okay.
Night.
Thank you. Thanks.
I might have it. I did go to Tantascwa.
Okay, so there's one more line item, budget item this evening, and that would be the Finance Committee, which is page C1 of the line item budget. And that falls under my purview. So basically, personnel costs, that pays for Elisa. So she can take care of taking
So she'll keep coming, right?
Exactly. And then everything else.
Yeah, at town meeting. We'll see you there.
Twice.
Related to the publication of the report of the Finance Committee and membership to the Association of Town Finance Committees. So therefore, I would make a motion to approve, well, to recommend to the town meeting body that the Finance Committee total budget be $7,508. Do I need a second? Mike? Okay, sorry. All right, 7508, Kevin and Mike. Any further questions? All those in favor? All those opposed? And, okay, so it's 7-0, it's unanimous. Okay, and that's all I had, or aware of people who are ready to do their line item budget items this evening. I don't know if anyone else has anything. I know we have some slated for next week. And next week, we should actually have, as you heard earlier this evening, some rough versions of the warrant articles. So that means we could start to take up that, since our agendas include, and would be the next thing on our agenda, the annual and then the special town meeting warrant articles. But as of this evening, we don't have any, but we did hear about one potential one. The report of the Finance Committee, I did come out of tonight's meeting just noting, I've been, like I said in our email when we kicked off, I'd be looking for some issues that might be, to bring to people's attention. Tonight I saw, we can do a cost-benefit study of the ambulance service. That might be something we can make a recommendation for. So moving.
Kevin, I'll be ready to do mine next week. I've already met.
Okay, I can put, right now I have for next week, actually Lee just moved. I had Ken for next week, and now I have Jim Waddick. Okay, great.
So Kevin, on your list, clearly there was, some staffing changes, new staffing across the board. We talked fire department tonight, there'll be some others, so those will be items we'll need to address in our report.
Okay, yeah, in the actual budget report section. What I'm talking about, we haven't done it in 2 years, but I sent out the email to everyone, prior to 2020, I think was the last year we actually did it. We used to put together things that came up through our budget discussions, issues that people weren't really focused on, and we thought townspeople should be aware of and know, and that maybe they want to take action on it and things like that. And that's where, like, the cost-benefit study comes from. But what you're talking about would be in my message for the budget, because that's a definite cost driver and why the budget is what it is.
Tell you what, right now, because the life of the landfill is gonna be determined very soon, how much life it's got left in it.
Right.
And then that's gonna be a cost driver for what do we do in the future.
Well, yeah, no, and that was one of the other things I think I sent out. I mean, we know, and we tried to discuss this last week with the Board of Selectmen, right? You got landfill capping costs, there's the radio project going on. What else did I write down in here? Sorry, I have to go back and through it. But we write the senior center's coming online, library HVAC, the sewer system moving from Southbridge. All these costs are coming. The SAFER grant that Mike pointed out to earlier that we discussed last week, that cost is going to come in-house in 3 years. If we continue, then you still had the fuel tank replacement, that's $600,000 down at the DPW if the tanks fail, if the test fails. There's the parking lot for, $500,000. So these costs are coming, and they're real costs, and they're not even in addition to all the other things. The bigger items, the DPW replacement, the refurbishment of the safety complex or replacement. There are other, and those things have been on for a long, long time. So, those are people, these things are gonna hit and be paid for in the next 2 to 3 fiscal years, right? Like I had mentioned when we did this building and across the street, we started, but it didn't actually hit the budget till 2 fiscal years later. So, you have to, it is a delayed reaction there, but then it's gonna show up and people are gonna realize it. All right, and now obviously that would be item number 6 here. That's all included in the report of the Finance Committee. So then moving past that, we have item number 7, which are meeting minutes, which we do have that one set of meeting minutes that came from Joanne that we can take up, which were for February 17th. And so we can just get those out of the way.
I'll make a motion that we accept them as submitted to us.
Okay. AW, that's Jim. Do I have a second? Larry? Any further questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed? And abstaining? I didn't get one. You're in favor?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll raise it higher.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No problems. All right, great. So that's 7-0, so we're good there. All right, so moving down a continuing agenda, we have old business. Anybody? Anybody with new business? And then finally, public access. And Bruce, I know you're in the back room, but I don't think there anyone else can dial in. I don't see anyone dialed in other than Barbara, so.
Thank you,
No,
Barbara.
no one can dial in.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.
So then we
Kevin.
move. Oh,
I did notice an error in the minutes. It says 2002 instead of 2020
where?
on the electronic copy that you sent.
Oh, up there.
I didn't know if it was on the ones that you were looking at.
Oh,
I
it had to
it
have
as a
been.
little
It's,
note, and
I got it from the
I
same
couldn't
thing.
remember, I knew there was an
Okay.
issue, and it was.
I can adjust that, and, I mean, it's a minor typo, obviously. Yeah, it is there.
Sorry.
No
I knew
problems.
There was something I wanted to raise, and
Nope, that's fine. It's now taken care
I'm
of.
full of useless help.
Larry was the
Okay.
only one on the finance committee in 2002.
No.
He was here, he was here in year 2 as well.
Roman numeral?
You hear that? You
Oh,
must
yeah.
have been. Yeah, you were, yeah.
I was started in 96.
Wow.
I
took a
remember
training
that.
test, yeah. It was way back.
I remember when you came to the school committee.
Oh, yeah.
We had to train you.
Beat on me, yeah. All right.
did.
Oh,
Feel lucky to start at the top then.
okay, so now I can take a motion to adjourn at 8:58.
So moved.
Okay, Mike, can I have a second? Larry? All those in favor? And that's unanimous. Thank you. Next time I didn't miss it. All right, thank you, everybody.